40, 50, 60 points. Gilbert Arenas was dropping major buckets on the best NBA players in his prime. Gil was a nightmare for opposing guards, but also for his teammates, as he is known to be one of the biggest pranksters in NBA history. Here's the rise and fall of Gilbert Arenas, also known as Agent Zero or Hibachi. Growing pains. Gilbert's mother went to jail when he was only 2 years old, and his father was taking care of him ever since. Arenas' dad was an actor, and he and little Gilbert were often living out of an old Toyota, while Arenas Sr. was in between acting jobs. Gilbert picked up basketball at the age of 6, and at the age of 11, he was already a known name on the local playgrounds. When he got to high school, it was clear that he was very talented, but Arenas was goofing around and didn't take it seriously enough. One day, his coach pulled him aside and threatened Gil that he was either to get serious or warm the bench. From that moment on, Gilbert would get up at 6 a.m. and train before everyone else. He started practicing for 6 hours a day, and slowly but surely, he blossomed into one of the best players in the state. With sophisticated moves, he was unstoppable one-on-one, equally deadly getting to the basket and shooting from the outside. He hoped to get a scholarship from UCLA, but he got overlooked by the Bruins, as well as many other major universities, mainly because he was too skinny. Gil eventually joined the Arizona Wildcats, choosing to wear the number 0 because that was the amount of minutes the scouts predicted he would play in his freshman year, and he was determined to prove them wrong. A wild Wildcat. In his debut for the Wildcats, Arenas delighted everyone. His play and movement on the floor were like poetry in motion, and he immediately became a fan favorite. In addition to being the best player on the team that featured future NBA players Richard Jefferson and Luke Walton, Gil was also the biggest clown on the team, always ready to pull a prank on anybody. There are plenty of stories about Gilbert's mischievous nature, but let's just mention the one time when he drove around campus with windows down, with sounds of adult movies blasting through the speakers. Volume was on the max, obviously. When he wasn't partying and messing around, he averaged 15.4 points per game as a freshman. But the Wildcats lost in the second round of the NCAA tournament. Next season, mainly because of Arenas' stellar play, the Wildcats reached the NCAA Finals. In the semifinals against Michigan State, Arenas suffered a pec injury in that game after a hit from Zach Randolph, which was felt very much in the final against Duke. Although he could barely shoot, it never occurred to him to miss the grand finale. Yes, he was bad in the finals, shooting 4 for 17, and probably the main reason their team lost. But Arenas showed how much heart he has, and that he'll give his best to prove the doubters wrong. Getting drafted. On the day of the draft, convinced of the high position, the Arenas family threw a big party. When Gilbert's name wasn't called even after the 20th pick, they panicked. The biggest reason his draft stock dropped so low in a bad draft class was his terrible behavior at the NBA Draft Combine. When Arenas was asked what was his main goal in the NBA, he simply answered that he wants to be a pimp. An NBA team representative gave him another chance to answer the same question. A very mature Arenas decided to clarify his answer further. I want to be an international pimp. But even that was not enough for him. On the 20-minute endurance test, he didn't want to damage his new sneakers, so he abruptly stopped after 3 minutes. Arenas eventually ended up as the 31st pick for the Golden State Warriors, and he again wore the number 0. Gilbert finished his rookie season ranking 4th in scoring and 3rd in assists and steals in limited minutes. With the arrival of a new coach, Arenas became the primary ball handler for the Warriors. During the summer, he trained like a maniac and watched hours of tape on the best NBA point guards, trying to grasp as much finesse as possible. All that prepared him to become the leader of the team in his second season. He made the leap from that skinny kid that scouts looked over into the biggest rising star in the NBA. With 18 points and 6 assists on average, he received the award for the most improved player. Although the Warriors had a better season, they still didn't make the playoffs, which infuriated Arenas. Even though he was a fan favorite and liked to be in Oakland, he got the $65 million 6-year contract offer from the Wizards. In typical Gilbert fashion, when he was supposed to pick his future team, he tossed a coin to make a choice. Literally, nothing else guided one of the biggest decisions of his life. The coin chose the Wizards, and the era of Agent Zero in Washington began. All-Star years. With the Wizards, Arenas showed all the splendor of his talent. He scored in bunches and notched triple-doubles, made game winners. He mastered the pick-and-roll game, and even Kwame Brown looked good playing next to him. With his size, speed, and ball-handling ability, he could drive to the paint with ease. But what made Arenas stand out was his ability to shoot the ball, which made him a big enigma for all the NBA defenders. Arenas was also a willing passer, and he had no holes in his game. Because of that, he was extremely unpredictable, and as a defender, you had to pick your poison with him. When Anton Jamison arrived for the 2005 season, the Wizards Wizards finally had a team capable of making a big result. Everything looked phenomenal. The guys had great chemistry, and Arenas had an all-star year. He was averaging 25, 5, and 5 for the season, and led Washington to the playoffs, where they lost to Shaq and D-Wade's Heat team in the semifinals. But if Gilbert's 2005 was impressive, 2006 and 2007 were magical. He was averaging 29.4 and 6 during those two seasons, and was arguably the best guard in the league, with Kobe, T-Mac, and Wade all in their prime. Agent Zero was burning everybody trying to guard him, and nobody was escaping his torture chamber. One of the best and most famous games of Arenas' career happened on the 17th of December 2006, the Wizards against the Lakers. Kobe Bryant versus Gilbert Arenas, primetime showdown. Kobe scored 45 points in the game, shooting 7 for 11 from 3, and almost notching a triple-double. Kobe was great, but Agent Zero was even better, and he completely stole the show. He dropped 60 in a direct duel with Bryant, who couldn't stay in front of him all night long. In the playoffs, the Wizards were good, but not good enough. In both 2006 and 2007, they lost to LeBron James and the Cavaliers, and the first loss will haunt Arenas' legacy forever. Even though he hit the 3 that sent the Game 6 to overtime and kept the Wizards' playoff dreams alive, he messed up in the OT. He could have almost decided the game with 2 free throws and 15 seconds remaining, but after a tap from LeBron, an 83% free throw shooter missed them both. On the other end, a player who Gilbert's been taunting the whole series, Damon Jones, hit the game winner in Arenas' face and sent Washington home. The Wizards have played the playoffs 3 times in their first 5 seasons. Before him, Washington had only 1 playoff berth in 16 years. Arenas was convinced the Wizards lacked just one more quality player to attack the title. He agreed to a salary reduction, but the management was so bad that they brought mediocre players around Gilbert, and he never had a realistic chance to contend for the title. Knee problems. From the 07-08 season, the knee problems started. After a clash with Gerald Wallace in the 14th game of the year, Gilbert tore his MCL and missed the rest of the year. However, after the season, he was still in high demand after he opted out of the final year of his deal. The Wizards then offered him another 6-year max deal, which he signed for $111 million. Unfortunately, he couldn't shake off the lingering knee injury, and Gil played in only 34 games in the next 2 years. But it wasn't just the injuries that kept Arenas away from the brilliant performances on the floor. His troublesome nature did too. Guns N' Roses. NBA players play cards for money, usually on plane rides, and more often than not, they argue about the play, but it's usually settled internally with all debts paid. The Washington Wizards were no exception, and in December of 2009, the team played cards, and JaVale McGee won the last game because the plane was already landing. And then, point guard Javaris Crittenden went mad and set out to attack McGee. Arenas went to defend him and said that he would set both Crittenden and his car on fire and then shoot him. Crittenden madly replied that he would bring guns. Just a day later, Agent Zero decided to take a few unloaded guns to the locker room. But Javaris had similar plans, only he brought loaded ones. They both pulled their guns out. Everybody scattered, and the police were called. The situation eventually calmed down, but both gunners were suspended until the end of the season, and Arenas was never the same player again. He returned to play for the Wizards in the 2010-2011 season, but he got traded to the Magic after only 21 games. In Orlando, he played until the rest of the season, but his legs were gone. Arenas shot an abysmal 34% from the floor for 8 points per game. Before the start of the 2012 season, the Magic decided to use the amnesty clause to get Gilbert's contract off the books. He thus became the first amnestied player in NBA history, which meant he lost a job, but still got paid for the remaining 3 years of his deal, which, if you ask Gilbert, is a pretty sweet victory. He signed for the Grizzlies during that season, but he only played 17 games there. In 2013, he played in China for the Shanghai Sharks before he finally retired. Legacy. Richard Jefferson said that Gilbert Arenas was a hybrid between Dame Lillard and John Wall, in terms that he was knocking almost 3 trays per game in his prime, but was also extremely dangerous driving to the rim like John Wall. I would actually compare Gil's prime years to James Harden because of how shifty he was and how he was able to draw fouls at a high rate. But if Gil was an all-star on the court, he is an absolute first-ballot Hall of Famer in effing around. Pranks, endless jokes, and his overall attitude were impossible to forget. And everybody who met No Chill Gil has a story with him. He was bringing donuts sprinkled with baby powder instead of sugar for his teammates. He would cut a suit in half so that his teammates would have to go home in a tracksuit. When he did that to Andre Blatch, he threw Gil's suit in the jacuzzi. Immediately afterward, Arenas relieved himself in Blatch's sneakers. The rise and fall of Gilbert Arenas includes an injury that puts him in the category with Penny Hardaway, Grant Hill, and Derrick Rose. Arenas was one of the greatest shooting guards in a point guard's body of all time. He was a madman in a mostly positive way. Hibachi did not take that end of his career tragically. He continued to live as before, always smiling and eager to have fun.